MOVEMBER, growing mustaches to raise awareness for prostate cancer and other men's health issues. If you'd like to donate, there will be a link in the description. Thank you. The pinnacle of soccer in the United States and Canada. The grand finale, the conclusion of an entire season's worth of hard work and dedication.
Ah, yes. MLS Cup. Is there anything better? Don't answer that. I have now watched every single MLS Cup. And originally the idea of this video was just to rank the top 10 MLS Cups of all time. But then I was like, wait, that's not who I am. That's not what I do. Because when I rank shit, I rank all of it. But I am going to split this up into two parts because ranking all the MLS Cups in one video would be really long. So Part 1, 27 through 11. Part 2, the top 10. Now, what is my criteria for ranking MLS Cups? Well, you got entertainment value, and that's about it. Like, okay, storyline maybe can play a small part, like 5% or so, but really, the main thing I'm looking at is how much fun did I have watching these games?
All right, let's start this off with dead last, the worst MLS Cup to date, number 27. It's 1999, DC United, LA Galaxy, Part 2. Ugh. Actually, there's a video about that already on my channel. You can go and check it out after this one. I honestly believe that every MLS Cup has been entertaining, except for this one. This one was terrible. A rematch of the first ever MLS Cup should have been epic, but unfortunately, an early injury to Robin Fraser really seemed to take the winds out of the sails for the Galaxy, and it led to two of the weakest goals in MLS Cup history. Yeah, the Galaxy tried to make something of it in the second half, but DC held on for the easy 2-0 win. The most memorable moment has to be this absolute disaster class by Kevin Hartman to give DC their second goal, and what I call the worst blooper in MLS history. At 26, I've got 2017 Toronto FC Seattle Sounders Part 2. Well, in 2016, Stephen Fry single-handedly won Seattle their first MLS Cup, and it was looking like this might be a repeat of that, as Fry was once again marvelous, saving the Sounders multiple times in the first hour of this one. But eventually, Josie Altidore did break through to give Toronto the lead, with Victor Vasquez providing an insurance goal in stoppage time, 2-0 Toronto over Seattle. Toronto officially completed the treble, Canadian Championship, Supporter Shield, and MLS Cup. While the scoreline was close for most of the game, the reality is that Seattle never really got that close to scoring. This one was all Toronto from the kickoff. Most memorable moment, it has to be Josie's goal. Remember, Toronto didn't score in 120 minutes in 2016, and then it took them 65 minutes to score in 2017. That's 3 hours of waiting for this moment. But boy, was it worth it. 25, 1998, Chicago Fire, DC United. You ever watch a game and say, man, this team just doesn't have it today? That was DC in 1998, one of the best teams in MLS that season, but they must have left their finishing boots at the hotel. The Fire had a beautifully executed first goal, and then kind of a lucky second goal with a deflection, while DC's afternoon, meanwhile, was filled with frustration and half chances. And the Fire became the first team, not named DC United, to win it all with a 2-0 victory.
See, I ain't biased. I've got the Chicago Fire's only MLS Cup win all the way down at 25. Believe me, I'm not thrilled about that. I wanted to put him higher, but I just couldn't justify it.
The most memorable moments, I'm actually not going to go with a goal here. I'm going to go with this Roy Lassiter header. Zach Thornton is there to make the save, and you could just see the frustration in Lassiter. Like, this was the moment you realized, yeah, DC ain't winning this one. At 24, I've got 2018 Atlanta United, Portland Timbers. 73,000 plus fans to see Atlanta win their first MLS Cup in just year 2 of existence. The fan experience was definitely a spectacle. The game itself was, all right, I guess. Atlanta were definitely on the front foot for most of it, but the Timbers still had their chances, like forcing Brad Guzan into this massive save in the first half. But once Franco Escobar scored early on in the second half to give Atlanta the 2-0 lead, it did kind of feel like this one was already over. The most memorable moment, give me the tifo. Getting the whole crowd in that with the train, Jesus Christ, now that is cool. That's what we're going to remember most about this game. Not the game itself, but the atmosphere of it all. Number 23, I've got 2020 Columbus Crew Seattle Sounders. Yeah, this one definitely benefited from the storyline because the Crew were just a few years removed from almost being relocated. And then not only did the fans save this team, not only did this team make MLS Cup, but they then smashed the defending champions, Seattle Sounders, 3-0 in what is the largest margin of victory in MLS Cup history. The only thing that wasn't storybook about it was the fact that this was the pandemic season and the stadium wasn't as full as it could have been. But honestly, that doesn't even really matter that much. This was still such a special night and such a complete beatdown. Most memorable moment? I mean, come on. What an exclamation point here by Lucas Zelarayan. 2 goals, 1 assist, one of the all-time great performances in MLS Cup history. 22. 2019 Toronto FC Seattle Sounders, Part 3.
I swear, Sounders fans must think I hate them because we're still in the bottom part of this countdown. This is, the 6th MLS Cup that I've listed, and the Sounders have been in 3 of them so far?
Okay, so Seattle took a 3-0 lead, and then Josie Altidore scored in stoppage time to make it 3-1. Yeah, when you say those facts out loud, it does kind of sound like this game was completely one-sided, but actually, Toronto did have their chances. It was just that Stephen Fry was once again massive in this one and made some huge saves. Most memorable moment is probably Rui Diaz's goal and Seattle's third. The roar of the crowd knowing they were going to win their second MLS Cup. Even though Josie scored like 5 seconds later, I'm not sure anyone in the stadium cared or was even paying attention because they knew this one was already over. At 21, it's 2011 LA Galaxy Houston Dynamo Part 1. David Beckham finally gets his MLS Cup with a 1-0 win over H-Town. How is this one so low? Well, to be honest, this game really wasn't that exciting. It was extremely one-sided, with the Galaxy dominating the number of chances. The most interesting part before the game winner was just seeing how many different times Adam Christman could miss. Even though it did take a while for the breakthrough, kind of like 2017 in Toronto, I never once felt like the Galaxy were in danger. The most memorable moment, well, this one's obvious, Beckham to Keane to Donovan with the silky smooth finish. Yeah, not the most thrilling game, but certainly one of the most iconic moments. Number 20, it's 2012 LA Galaxy Houston Dynamo Part 2. A rematch of the year before, and this time the Dynamo actually put some real pressure on the Galaxy. While LA definitely still had more of the opportunities, it was Kalen Carr who struck first for the Dynamo at the end of the first half. But the Galaxy turned up the heat in the second half, and you knew it was only a matter of time before they broke through. And once the first goal came from Omar Gonzalez, the Dynamo just started to fall apart. The Galaxy would earn 2 more PKs, convert them both, and take their second straight MLS Cup with a 3-1 victory. The most memorable moment comes in the postgame for me. This was definitely it. The first ever DP, the guy who changed the league forever, was officially leaving. Seeing David Beckham lift the cup with the Union Jack flag draped over his shoulders is the lasting image from this game. At number 19, it's 2000 Chicago Fire and Kansas City Wizards. Danish Dynamo Miklos Molnar struck first for KC with probably the most underwhelming game winner in a cup final ever. But after that, it was the Tony Meola show. Despite Chicago outshooting Kansas City 20-6, Meola stood on his head and blocked everything. I swear, it's like every shot was just a reaction save from like 5 feet away. Shots that should be going in, but not against Tony Meola. The Wizards won 1-0, and the only goalkeeper to win MLS MVP capped his season with an MLS Cup MVP performance. Most memorable moment? Just Meola. 18, 2008's Columbus Crew, Red Bull New York.
Yeah, this is kind of a weird matchup because you don't typically see two teams from the same conference competing at MLS Cup. But because of the wonky playoff format back then, New York Red Bulls actually qualified for MLS Cup by being the Western Conference champs.
But even still, a fun back and forth game and an absolute masterclass by Guillermo Barros-Schelotto. Dare I say it? Had the single greatest performance in MLS Cup history. His 3 assists propelled the crew to a 3-1 win over the Red Bulls. Most memorable moment, it just had to be the 3rd goal. A delicate chip over the back line and the face of the club, Frankie Hejduk, heading it in. The last goal of the season, the last goal of MLS Cup. You couldn't write it any better. At 17, I've got 1997 DC United Colorado Rapids. Now on paper, this looked like a total mismatch with Supporter Shield winning side DC United taking on a Colorado Rapids side that lost 4 more games than they won that season. Yeah, no one talks about this game. I kind of understand why, because 1996 was such an iconic first championship, and this one definitely wasn't as memorable. But it was still a fun, wet game. Colorado proved that they weren't pushovers, testing Scott Garlick a few times, but DC United took a 2-goal lead before Adrian Paz hammered in one to cut the lead in half. Wasn't enough though, as DC won back-to-back titles with a 2-1 victory. Most memorable moment, can I just say Marcus Hahnemann's hat? Okay, I know that's not a moment per se, but seriously, more keepers should rock the backwards cap. Looks badass.
What?
At 16, I've got 2016 Toronto FC Seattle Sounders Part 1.
Now here's a mind-blowing fact. This is the first MLS Cup not to feature one of the 10 original teams. Yeah, it took 21 seasons, but it's the first time we've got 2 expansion teams meeting for MLS Cup. Toronto FC came in 2007, Seattle Sounders came in 2009.
Toronto pressed, and Seattle defended, and it was a complete stalemate. There have been thrilling 0-0 draws in soccer before. This one, not as much. This cup definitely lacked memorable moments, and Seattle, despite not registering a single shot on target, managed to win in the PK shootout in the only scoreless MLS Cup final to date. While it didn't have a ton of memorable moments, the most memorable moment is one of the most iconic plays in MLS history, simply known as the save. Stefan Frei with the full stretch fingertip save on Jozy Altidore's header. Sorry, Jozy, you're gonna have to wait until next year to get your cup. At 15, it's 2005 LA Galaxy New England Revolution Part 2. Despite being the heavy underdogs, it was the Galaxy who created the better chances throughout the early parts of this game. But the longer the game went, the more the Revs started to heat up, and eventually you knew that someone from one of these teams was going to break through. And as it turned out, that breakthrough came from the most unlikely source. Pando Ramirez, a guy that had 1 goal all season long, hits the volley and gives the Galaxy the 1-0 win over the Revs. The most memorable moment? You already know. What a fucking hit. And in extra time too? One of the best goals ever scored in MLS Cup. 14, it's 2021 NYCFC Portland Timbers. The most dramatic of finishes in regular time, with a last-second goal in stoppage time to tie the match and send it to extra time. It was as dramatic as you can get. The 90 minutes before that, sure, Tati Castellanos scored, but other than that, yeah, it was not the most exciting game. It picked up in the extra time periods, and we got to see Sean Johnson step up and play the hero in the PK shootout. NYCFC shed their title of perennial playoff losers and ended up winning in Portland in the shootout. The most memorable moments? Yeah, the game-tying goal is probably the easy answer, but come on. The real answer has to be the push-ups afterward by Ronnie Dyla. 13, it's 2007 Houston Dynamo New England Revolution Part 2.
This was the Revs' 4th trip to MLS Cup, and also their 3rd straight trip to MLS Cup. But so far up to this point, they were winless in the big game. A lot of people like to joke, oh, the Revolution, they're the Buffalo Bills of MLS. And what I have to say is, no, the Revs are worse. Because the Bills, great team, but they were underdogs against the Redskins and against the mighty Dallas Cowboys. The Revolution were absolutely favorites against the Galaxy in 05 and the Dynamo in 06, and especially the Dynamo in 07, who were playing this game severely shorthanded.
Brian Ching out with the injury and Ricardo Clark serving a suspension for trying to kill Carlos Ruiz earlier that season. Everything seemed to be going the Revs' way in that first half. A classic Taylor Twellman header gave the Revs the lead heading into halftime, and the boys in orange just looked flat. But the Dynamo came out in the second half looking revitalized, turned up the pressure on New England, and then the Revs did what they always do. They crumbled in crunch time. 2 second-half goals gave the Dynamo the 2-1 victory. Most memorable moments? Obviously, it's gotta be D-Row. Yeah, the snap header and the dance that followed were great, but the broadcast call...
There's his big one! There's his big one! There's his big one!
Now that was perfection. 12. It's 2010 Colorado Rapids FC Dallas.
You know, a lot of people like to hate on this final and just completely dismiss it, but I think the only reason for that is because this wasn't the most high-profile matchup. I mean, it was Colorado and Dallas, two teams that aren't normally playing for MLS Cup.
But I thought this one was a lot of fun. It was pretty evenly matched. It was really physical. Both teams had their chances. Both goalkeepers made massive saves, and both teams went for the win. They weren't playing for the shootout here. Colorado would eventually win in extra time 2-1. The most memorable moments? Well, it is easily the most tragic game winner in MLS Cup history. For both sides. Matt Kanji brings the ball down, nutmegs his defender, stretches out to poke the ball, which pinballs off Dallas's George John for the own goal. Yeah, an own goal in extra time was the winner. And as for Kanji, well, he ended up tearing his ACL on the play.
I feel your pain in that one, brother.
Yeah, congrats on winning the Cup, Kanji. Now, as a reward, you have to miss all of next season rehabbing. And at number 11, it's 2004 DC United Kansas City Wizards. Oh, I struggled with this one because I wanted this one to crack the top 10 because this was a really entertaining game. You start off with Jose Burciaga blasting in a long-range shot. You could tell even he was surprised with the goal because he had no idea what to do with the celebration. But then after that, it was the ELLoCoMoNo show. 2 goals in a span of 4 minutes. The second one, a clear missed handball call by the refs. And then DC would add a third goal, now 3 in just 7 minutes. Dima Kovalenko would get a red card in the second half. KC would pull one back, but United were able to hold on in a wild 5-goal affair, winning their 4th MLS Cup 3-2. Most memorable moment, I gotta go with ELLoCoMoNo's second goal. DC was really pushing the gas pedal now, taking control of this game. But, I know I already mentioned it, it's worth repeating. Yes, in my opinion, this is absolutely a handball. And who knows, if that call is made, maybe Kansas City regroups and doesn't lose on this day.
There it is, MLS Cups ranked 27 through 11. The next video, oh yeah, that's when we start to have some real fun. It'll be the top 10 MLS Cups ever played. But until then, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.